Hello everyone, this is Damon with Pixnub.com. For this video, I'm going to be demonstrating this really cool set of actions called Hyperzoom that you can get on our website. These actions are used to create this effect for your sports action shots. It doesn't actually have to be sports action shots. You can use posed images too, but just make sure that your images have something in the background because it actually creates this effect from the background image. And you can really customize it to get different look and feel that you want. And I'll be showing that here in this tutorial. The first thing you need to do is load in your actions. And so if you haven't already done so, under the window menu, select actions, and that's going to load your actions menu. And then in the upper right hand corner, select the little icon and then select load actions. Oops, I did not mean to hit reset actions. Select load actions. A couple things before we get started I need to mention. First thing is don't rename the set of your actions and don't move the actions around into different sets. If you rename this, it will not work because these actions play other actions within the action set. And if you rename it, I'll just show you here, the main actions play these sub-actions that are looking for the actions in this same set. And so it's looking for those in the same location. And if you rename it, it's not going to be able to find the sub-actions, and so it won't be able to play those. And I'll be discussing the sub-actions more later on in the video, but the one thing I will mention right now is don't just go blindly turn all these on, because I know some people might see some of these are unchecked and think they want everything and check these on. By turning those on, you are changing how the actions run, and they are off by default. These are meant for changing the default settings for how the actions run. Like I say, I'll discuss this later on in the video, but for now we're just going to start with the regular actions. And so the actions are labeled either hyperzoom or sub actions. The hyperzoom actions are the ones that you'll play to get the effect, and all of the actions provide the exact same effect with the exception that the actions are fine-tuned to different image sizes. And that is because actions are not smart enough to self-adjust based on the image size, and these actions will blend the foreground into the background, and that blending will look different on different sizes of images if using the same exact settings. So because of that, I recorded different actions with different settings that compensate for different image sizes so you can get the same look on different image sizes based on the action that you run. So what you want to do is know the size of your image. So under image size, where you see height here, this is based on height. Just find the action where the height of your image falls within the range and use that action. The actions that say resize, these will actually resize your images. The ones that don't say resize won't resize, but the ones that say resize will resize before the rest of the action runs, and they resize the height of your image to a specific height. And you'll use these in the example that you have a bunch of images in a folder that are different sizes, and let's say you want to batch process those. You can have the batch process resize everything to a specific size, and that way it'll auto compensate for images of different sizes, and so you'll get the same look, feel, and size for all the images in the batch. Alright, so let's just start over, and I've got 3 different images here I'll be going over, and I got different images just because each of these images allows me to show different things in this tutorial. So I'm going to start over with the original image. I'm just going to select the action that says 2500 to 3500 pixels. Remember, because this image is 3000 pixels tall, so just find the action that's for the correct size and hit play. And again, these top ones will not resize your image. The ones that say resize will resize your image. It takes just a few seconds to run, and the time it takes to run really depends on the size of your image. Larger images will take longer. So you see that this ran, and it looks pretty good except for the color is not what we want. And we could maybe change the brightness of the background as well. Now the color is under the background hue layer. This is the hue of your background. You can go in here and just change the hue. You notice that if you change the brightness or saturation, nothing changes. It's only the hue changes, and that's because this is in hue blending mode. Now, you can also change this to color blending mode, which will give you a different look. Usually I like hue blending mode, but color blending mode does allow you to adjust the saturation of the background overall. That's because the color blend mode forces both hue and saturation, whereas hue mode only forces the hue. I'm not going to get too in depth on color theory with the blending layers, but just know that hue mode most of the time, but sometimes color mode will give you the look you want. You can also go into these sub-actions that specify the colors, and you got red colors, hue 0, orange colors, hue 30, all the way down to the purple colors. So I created different sub-actions for the colors, and if you just hit play on any one of those, it's going to set the color for both of your color modes or your color layers. Now this top layer is off by default. It doesn't do anything. It's for a touch-up on the edges, which this image really doesn't need it. I'm going to demonstrate this later in this tutorial on a different image. And the next thing you can adjust, I'm going to set this back to red here because that matches the uniform. But the next thing is the brightness and contrast, and you can just adjust. Really, it's just the brightness that you'll be adjusting. But that sets the brightness of your background, and it sets it in the center, and it's got the vignette effect on it, so it's not affecting the brightness on the edge. For this image, I actually like this turned up a bit, around 125 or so, I think. It actually looks pretty good. It makes the images have a real nice pop to it. And then the last thing you can adjust is your vibrance or saturation. Now this is where you can force the saturation if you're in hue blending mode, is with this vibrance and saturation. Although I really did mean for this adjustment here to be for the case when you don't want to add a background color. So you can actually use these with the original colors of the background. And if we turn the hyper zoom off, you can see this is our original background here. And with this on, if you have the color layers turned off, you get the zoom blur effect, but you're using the colors of your background. So it really depends on the look and feel you're trying to get from your particular image as to whether you'll want to use a color or not. But with the background colors, often I'll adjust this vibrance and saturation just to bring out a little more color into the background. It really just depends on the images, like I say. Now once you have the colors that you want, the one thing you may have to do, and there is a touch-up layer for that, is this relies on select subject to make the selection. If I just Alt click or Option click on Mac, you can see the mask that this creates. And this is what blends your foreground into your background. And you see this has got very blurry edges. And because the background is based on the image itself and it's blending your foreground image into a background that was made of itself, you can really get away with using a blurred edge and really just get this nice effect to blend. But one thing the select subject does, though, sometimes it selects things you don't want. And in this image, some of this reflection, maybe I wouldn't have wanted that in the foreground. And you can see on the shoe here, maybe I just want that to be more blurred into the background. So if you select a brush, you can touch up that mask. And I'm going to use a black brush to paint the effect off. And when you do this, use a soft brush. I mean, hardness at 0 is what I'm using here. And then make the brush size according to what you need to do. But you can see you can just brush that off, and it's just fading that effect. And this image really didn't need much touch-up, if any, on the mask, but I do have another image in this tutorial I'm going to show you that requires more touch-up, so I'll get more in depth on that in that video. So the next thing we're going to do is I'm going to show you how to optimize or customize, I should say, the settings to be what you want when you play the action. That way, if you're running a batch, you don't have to go in and set up all the different settings that you want. And that's what these sub-actions down here are for. The ones I told you to not check on, I'm now going to show you what they do. And when I said don't check them on without knowing what you're doing. And because, like I say, it will change the look of it. So, as mentioned earlier in the video, each of these actions plays these 5 different sub-actions. And they each do different things. And if they're turned off, it just simply doesn't play those actions. Or it'll play it, but there's no steps turned on, so it won't do anything. But the first one is change the color blend mode. So remember when I told you you had the choice of hue or color? If you turn this color blend mode action on, it's going to change the blend mode to color in both of these layers when it runs. And the next one is color switcher. What this does is it runs any one of these color actions to set the color automatically when it runs. I'm going to change this just to green just to set it to do something. And these sub-actions play in every single action. So if you make a change here, you're affecting how every one of these hyper zoom actions runs. Okay, and the next one is the background brightness. And remember when I turned this up to 125? Well, in here, this sets your default background brightness. And it's 50 is the one that it comes with on by default, but let's turn that off and turn on 125. So that way when the action plays, it'll be 125 on that. I'm just going to check this one on just so I can show you that it's doing something, but this is the turn off color layers. So this will actually turn the color layers off, and so that way you're seeing the colors from your background. So I'm going to rerun this action with all these changes I made just so you can see how the changes I made here affect the outcome of the image. Okay, you see each one of these changes I made did take effect. So it did change your colors to green, and it also turned the colors off because we told it to in here. You notice that the color layers are set to color blend mode, and again that's because I turned this action on, this sub action, changed the color blend mode. Like I say, normally I like it in hue, but it's up to you what you want to do with that. And then the color switcher is what set it to be green. And then the brightness is 125, just like we told it to, into set background brightness. Now I'm going to change these again to how I actually want to use the image. So I would want to turn the turn off color layers, which leaves the color layers on. So if this isn't checked, your color layers will be on. I'm going to uncheck the change the color blend mode because I want this in hue. And for background brightness, okay, let's leave it at 125. And for color switcher, let's turn this on red. Okay, so now this is going to give me the look that I wanted from the image, and it's the exact same look that you saw when I started the video. And this way, as mentioned, you can batch process and get the exact color and brightness that you want for the image. All right, so let's move to the next image, In this one, I'm not going to have to run it. I've already ran the action. I'm going to show you this color touch-up layer, which I already have set. So I'm going to delete everything in there. And what this is for is if you see on the edge here, you've got this kind of red hue blending in. That's actually coming from the background itself. You've got this, I guess it's a running track, this red color. And because the edges, as mentioned, are really soft for how this effect works, if you're trying to set a color for the overall background and image that kind of clashes with your foreground colors here, that can show through on these blurred edges. So what you do is you go into the edge touch-up and you make sure this is set to the color you want. And then you just select a brush. And we're going to use a soft white brush, so we're painting the effect on. Make sure you click in the mask. That way you're painting in the mask. And just brush over the edges. You don't have to really be too careful. I mean, just real nice and soft on the edges. Now, if you go too far in, you see you can start painting color where you don't want it. So I'm going to undo that here. Control Z, or you could grab a black brush anywhere you want to undo that and paint. So, for example, if I paint the black brush, you see that I painted the effect off. And the X key, by the way, switches your foreground and background swatches. And so the foreground swatch is the one you're painting. That's the upper left-hand corner. And white paints the effect on, and black paints the effect off. And it's usually just a really quick step that takes you a few seconds to fine-tune the color on the edges if needed. I spent more time talking about it than probably I needed to. It's actually very simple. So on to the last image. I wanted to show this image to show you that you don't need to use an image that just has one person in it. However, the Photoshop Select Subject, when you start getting an image such as this image where you have multiple people in it and there's a lot of clutter in the background, the Select Subject is not entirely accurate. So let's just run Select Subject here just to show you what it does. You see that these selections are not great. However, this is really easy to touch up anyway. So I'm just going to run this. And then I'll show you how easy it is to go and touch up the layers. All right, now this is not obviously the color I want for the background. And like we discussed in the last video, you could set your different sub-actions to give you what you want. So in this image, I'm going to just turn off the colors. Just turn the brightness down, I don't know, around 75 maybe. But then we just go into the layer called Person, and we just grab a very soft brush again, brush off what we don't want. In the case of this referee, we don't want the referee, so let's just brush him. Really not sure. Oh, somehow the opacity of that brush got set down to 30. I don't know what I did there. Nonetheless, let's just turn that opacity down to 100. That's a good point too. If you see something's not acting the way you should, just take a second to stop and look to see what may be different. In the case there, I don't know what happened, but the brush got set to 30% opacity. But again, I'm just brushing on and off what I want and what I don't want. And the X key again swaps the foreground and background. Once you get good, this is pretty quick, and like I say, you just use a really soft brush too, and you don't have to be too perfect on the edges, because the whole thing is just a blurred effect anyway, so you're really blurring the background into the foreground, so you don't have to be terribly accurate for the most part. I mean, something like that actually looks pretty decent. I could go in and fine tune it a little bit more, but for the sake of a tutorial, I think it's good enough. So anyway, thanks for watching, and if you're interested at all in these actions, please be sure to check it out on the website. There is a link in the description to this video for these actions.